Welcome in my YouTube channel, Islamo-Leftism, or Islamophobo-Leftism. Across the political spectrum, a common collection of narratives is rationalising, minimising and invisibilising violence against Muslims. Meet the latest sensation in the Islamo-Demonology franchise, Islamo-Leftism, the French state's pet bogeyman du jour. According to the anti-Islamo-leftists, discourses challenging oppression, such as anti-colonialism, anti-racism, and feminism, actually serve as sources of oppression, by enabling radical Islam. In previous decades, it was Islamo-fascism that was all the rage, connoting Islam's purported affinity not with the left, but the far right. For centuries before that, it was what might now be called Islamo-Judaism, the recurrent conspiracy theories conjoining Jews and Muslims as threats to European Christendom, so that the two infidel races were treated as halves of a single body of Semitic aliens, as analysed by medieval literature scholar Geraldine Heng. As the political sands shift, the bogeyman is perpetually reconfigured to fit the current landscape. To quote 19th-century French Orientalist Ernest Renan, Islam is imagined as the most complete negation of Europe, however Europe happens to see itself at the time. When Europe was gripped by homophobia and sectarianism, Muslim societies were criticized for being too non-heteronormative and multicultural, signs of Muslim degeneracy remedied through the imposition of colonial rule. Now that the signifiers of civilization have switched, public intellectuals like French philosopher Pascal Bruckner complain that Islamo-Leftism is curtailing their ability to freely demonize Muslims for being too intolerant. In anti-racism's permanent war of all against all, accusations of Islamophobia are a weapon of mass intimidation, Bruckner insists. Meanwhile, the non-metaphorical state of permanent war against Muslims persists, and those documenting its atrocities and critiquing its underpinning ideology continue to be subject to marginalization, suppression and punishment by the state and other institutions of power. For example, the Collectif contre l'Islamophobie en France, Collective Against Islamophobia in France, was liquidated by the French government in November. Prominent Islamophobia expert Professor Ferhat Hafız's home was raided by counter-terrorism police in Austria, also in November, part of a series of raids against Muslim academics and activists. And in February, the eminent philosopher and anti-racist, Palestine solidarity activist Professor Cornel West was denied tenure at Harvard University. It seems Bruckner's weapon of mass intimidation inhabits the same plane of unreality as Iraq's weapons of mass destruction. And it serves an analogous function of depicting the targets of systemic aggression as the aggressors. Bruckner is frequently described as a man of the left, highlighting the incoherence of the term Islamo-Leftism, which obfuscates the Islamophobia within the left itself. Even the very party accused by French political leaders of being an epicenter of Islamo-Leftism, France Insoumise, has hosted speakers claiming that one has the right to be Islamophobic, and could barely muster any representatives to participate in a march against anti-Muslim hate after an attack on a French mosque in 2019. The enduring power of Islamophobia is that there's something in it for almost everyone, from right to left. In March, the right-wing Swiss People's Party managed to break its losing streak in citizens' referendums, with its victorious proposal to banish Muslim women's face veils from public space, which attracted twice the vote share as the party won in the general election. As did its similarly successful 2009 campaign to prohibit minaret construction, which appealed to feminists by portraying minarets as a symbol of women's oppression. This from the same political organization that previously fought against a motion to recognize gender equality in marriage. In countries like Germany and France, left-wing parties and activists have been on the front lines of initiatives to impose state coercion on Muslim women's clothing, for the sake of liberating Muslim women. There are now 5 times more European states legally forcing women to unveil as there are Muslim-majority states requiring women to veil. The Inquisition obsession with stripping Muslims of their head coverings and minarets lives on. In the 15th century, the problem was said to be the uncleanliness of Muslim and Jewish blood. Now, it's the incompatibility of Muslims with our culture and values. As Black American novelist Toni Morrison wrote, "When it comes to racism, there will always be one more thing. Islamophobia is a great unifier, transcending even the ideological divide between China and the West. Since 9/11, China has repackaged its settler colonial assault on the Muslim Uyghurs of Xinjiang as a war on terror exercise, pathologizing Islam as a virus to be eradicated with mass surveillance and biometric collection, forced labor, forced sterilization, child separation, criminalization of religious practices and re-education in concentration camps. Yet in the name of resisting Western imperialism against China, some on the left act as denialists and apologists for China's genocidal imperialism, the most damning evidence of which emanates from China's own official documents. At a recent seminar organized by Canadian anti-war groups to debunk the Uyghur genocide, China's consul general showed a PR video of Xinjiang that was predominantly images of empty landscapes. Even in China's genocide-denying propaganda, the Uyghurs are largely scrubbed out of the picture. To invoke the language of the US military, Islamophobia is a system of full-spectrum domination. Not the purview of one segment of the political field, but a common frame of reference across the field as a whole. This treatment of Muslims as a universal enemy is deeply rooted in history. In the famous 16th century Valladolid debate on the colonization of the Americas, considered a foundational event in the Eurocentric history of international law, Spanish legal scholars debated indigenous peoples' humanity by deciding whether they were like Muslims and therefore to be massacred, the conservative position, or unlike Muslims and therefore to be missionized into Christianity, the liberal position. Erasmus, one of the fathers of humanism, urged Europeans to stop fighting each other and let loose this evil passion upon the Turks instead. Father of free speech, Voltaire opined that Muslims were the greatest curse on earth and should be destroyed. Mother of feminism, Mary Wollstonecraft advocated for the emancipation of European women by distinguishing them from subordinated and subhumanized